Hi, everybody. This is GM John Fedorowicz for the Altibox Norway recap. I'll start with the standings. This tournament's become a traditional tournament. It's a very strong tournament every year. Magnus Carlsen always plays as he has the home court advantage. And I used to play in Norway a lot in the old days with my friend who was a great organizer, Aronian. So I played in Norway about 10 times. It's a very nice country to visit. And I hope to get back there and play again someday. So I'll start with the standings. After 3 rounds, I hesitate. I'm a chess player, so I wouldn't call anything boring. I don't find any of the games boring. But there were only 2 decisive results in 3 rounds. One was Nakamura defeating Giri, and the other one was Kramnik, former world champion Vladimir Kramnik, defeating former world champion Vishwanathan Anand. So we have Nakamura on 2 points. We have Kramnik on 2 points. We have a lot of people on 1.5, starting with Magnus Carlsen, the present world champion. We have Wesley So, American champion. We have Levon Aronian. We have Bachier Legrave, Fabiano Caruana, Sergei Karyakin, all 1.5. And then on 1, we have the 2 losers of the decisive games, Giri and also Anand. So those are the standings after 3 rounds. And it's for instance, today was a round with all draws, but I think the games were all fighting games, and it was just good defense. I saw a lot of people were slightly worse, in some cases medium worse, but they defended well and achieved the draws. Also, you see some game like Bachier Legrave, Fabiano Caruana, where Fabiano plays the Petrov defense. Look, the Petrov defense is a great opening. What it's supposed to do is it's supposed to make a draw with black, and that's what Fabiano did today. So I would never criticize that. And I feel like if I played the Petrov, sometimes in the Sicilian, in some cases, made some draws, maybe I would have had some better results in U.S. championships and so on and so forth. But so that's the story with today's round. So when it just turns out, it's kind of funny that it turns out this way, that whenever I cover one of these big tournaments, I always get Carlsen-Nakamura. It's just the luck of the draw. It's not by design. And so today, the other day, I was preparing for this show, and I was wondering what the pairings were, and I looked, and sure enough, it was Carlsen playing white against Nakamura. So I'm always happy to go over those games and to see. And I'm a big fan of Nakamura's, and I always root for him to do well. When I do these shows, of course, I'm impartial and I tell the truth as far as the games go. So let's get to the games. Nakamura plays a Sicilian, and every now and then Carlsen tries out an open Sicilian. If you go back, you'll see some games where he beat Nakamura in a very long game with bishop to e2. It was probably about 6 years ago or so. And Nakamura likes to reply with e5. Also, there was a game where Nakamura played the Kalashnikov, which I don't know. It's not a bad opening, but on this level, I would not do it. I think the knight off has always been one of the best defenses in one of the best openings in chess. Of course, it's a lot to learn, but on this level, Nakamura knows everything. You got to know about bishop g5. You got to know about bishop c4. Of course, the English attack continues to be popular with the reply 6 bishop to e3, and then the other replies h3 and g3, rook g1, and I just think the knight off is such a hard opening to crack that after a while, when I was playing white against it, I just decided to heck with it, play bishop e2 like Karpov did, and just try and make a position. And it's an impossible opening. You're not going to refute it, so just play something normal against it. It's pretty much what Carlsen does today. Carlsen plays h3, and Nakamura replies with g6. So he transfers in a slow system like h3, a6, getting into a dragon, it's the type of position. It's not that big a deal. E6 or E6, E5 or other replies here that black can play. So G6, G3. If you look up old Fischer games, I think there's some kind of Reshevsky. I think it was Fischer Reshevsky actually with G4 in this position, but that's a long time ago, and I think these things have been figured out a little bit better now. And I think that Carlson, it's not really his style. He goes more for solid positional. So we get one of these G3 dragon positions, and Nakamura here decides to go for knight to D7. It's also possible to play like a dragon with bishop to D7 and rook C8. But then white at some point goes knight D5 and tries to make a space advantage. So I think that Nakamura's move is a good idea here. And B3 from Carlson. A lot of trades. And B6 to fianchetto the bishop. And now after knight D5, I'm not sure that I really like knight D5 because I like Nakamura's move now. After bishop to B7, C4, he played E5, and already he's going for a good knight versus a bad bishop type of situation. Hoping to take that knight on D5 at some moment, and then maybe establish a strong knight on C5, and maybe try to get one pawn to A5 to anchor the knight. If he really was lucky, he would get the pawn to B4, and the knight would be anchored, and black could even be better in that kind of situation with a good knight versus a bad bishop. So instead, queen to E3. I like the move B5. Typical counterplay here. If pawn takes, the A file opens, and then he will still try this bishop takes. He might even go bishop takes in this position before rook D1 is played, and he'll have no problem defending his pawn. I don't think this A pawn, if an A4 happened, would be a big deal. It's blocked, and it could be blocked some more. So black would have a completely satisfactory position after knight C5. So Carlson played rook to C1, took back with the rook. Again, taking back with the pawn would be a positional error. I think just knight C5, and you can see that's a very strong knight on C5, and I would have to award black's a slight advantage in that type of position. So rook takes C4, bishop takes, pawn takes, A5 with the idea of going knight C5 and trying to establish knight there. Of course, Carlson will try to get rid of it with A3 and B4. Knight C5 and then F5. And in this position, white might be getting a slight advantage here. It's a typical position. He's playing to pressure this pawn, and also he has a passed pawn that he could start pushing if soon if black isn't careful about it. So Nakamura plays very sharp here with F4. Rook F6 seemed like a decent move also, just to take it easy and maybe go F4. After Nakamura plays F4, Carlson jumps on the opportunity to win a pawn at the expense of opening up his king a little bit. And Nakamura goes queen G5, which is threatening to play F3 and win. So Carlson has to move the king to the side. And then Nakamura plays F3, forcing the bishop back to F1. And now Carlson has to be careful of various attacks here. And also, there could be some perpetuals and whatnot. And he also has to be careful of back rank threats. Here, I thought maybe Carlson was slightly better here, maybe medium better, but certainly Nakamura has a lot of counterplay here, and his king's going to be safe. So queen E6, pinning, and then Nakamura steps out of the pin with king to G7. And Carlson trades. Nakamura is happy to trade, and his king hides out on H. So everybody's protected here. His king is safe. And also, Nakamura has this very annoying threat of rook to A1 winning. So Carlson has to draw back to prevent that threat. And then Nakamura plays rook to here, starting to pressure this pawn with possibly things like queen to H4, and with some ideas of knight to G4, also good attacking continuations with his three remaining pieces. So a good move from Carlson, defending, getting the rook back into the game from this side. And now this move forces a draw with knight to G4. He played pawn takes, queen here, queen takes, and draw by perpetual. I don't see a case in this game where Carlson could have done something a little better. His moves made sense, and also Nakamura was always had the fact that Carlson's king was open, and even though Carlson won some material, it was Nakamura that had the safer king. I think that usually Carlson does better when he doesn't play an open Sicilian against Nakamura. If you look at the games with D4 and stuff like that, you'll see that I think he achieves better positions. Sometimes Nakamura plays some, I don't know, not so great openings if you play D4 against him on move one. And when you play E4, he'll usually play a knight or and he knows it very, of course he knows it very well, and knows all the nuances and all the little tricks and whatnot, and of course all the theory involved in it. So this was a good fighting game. I enjoyed it, and it was a draw, and then we'll get to the second game. Second game of the third round will be Aronian playing against Giri, and another game that ended in a draw. But if you look at this game was pretty exciting also. And perhaps there was some moments where somebody was leaning towards medium better, and it seemed to be black. And let's get started and see what happens. Okay, Aronian always plays D4 move one, and Giri used to play Grunfelds and stuff like this, but now he's gone in for Queen's Gambits. And this Rogozin system gets a lot of play nowadays. I'm not sure really why. I don't think it's really a wonderful system for black, but as I said, with other openings, people seem to, well, they really know what they're doing, and they can get away with playing some subpar variations. I'm surprised we don't see the Tartakover more often. And also, when people like, when somebody like Anand is back, sometimes you see the Moscow variation, or you see the Botvinnik variation with the crazy stuff with the H6 and the G5 coming. So, and that leads to pretty lively play. So bishop to B4, and in this one, Aronian goes to Queen A4 check, blocked by Knight C6, E3. I wish there was another move here for white other than E3, because whenever this bishop gets blocked, black is going to probably be okay. The knight can get in the way of some of the counterplay because it's leaving a pawn back on C7. But I think once you see E3, I think that black knows he's going to come out of it, with a pretty decent game. And then the queen dropped back to C2. So Aronian's idea is that it's a Nimzo position with the knight on C6, which shouldn't hurt black's position that much. Rook E8 is a good move. Black is always trying for E5 later. White wants to avoid pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, because that would make black's life easier, opening up this bishop. Bishop to D2, sort of, I don't know, just a waiting move. He's hoping that Giri takes him and he gets the capture on C4, move one. Giri does not want to do that. Giri plays A6, which sometimes when he takes on C4, he can come out fast with B5 and bishop to B7. That's a typical idea in a lot of Queen's Gambits. H3, really another waiting move. And then Giri drops back with bishop to D6. And bishop to D6 is still waiting for this bishop to move. The bishop wouldn't want to go to D3 because a knight B4 takes the bishop, and then this bishop unopposed could cause a lot of trouble. And plays A6 just as a possibility of going bishop E3 to stop knight B4 ideas. Also, the knight B4 ideas could be decent as well because it gets the knight out of the way and might allow black to attack the center more with C5. Bishop to D7, Giri just developed, still waiting for this bishop to move. And finally, the bishop moves, and he takes it. So that was a lot of cat and mouse and dancing around things and whatnot. And finally, he took. So now Giri has to hit in the center on the next move with E5 before E4 was played. So, well, first he plays H6. The thing with E4 here is that E5 would be good, I think. And D5, knight D4, and I think black's actually becoming better there. White can't take because then the rook is opened up on the E pawn. So h6 is a is another good move, which stops knight g5 ideas later, and just a solid game. It's pretty funny. You don't see this too often. Probably if some of my students played these moves, I would yell at them. H6, what does that do? H3, what does that do? And and I hope they don't see this game because maybe they'll try to play like that. And in this game, it worked for Black. Got Black a pretty good position. Now E5 happened, and in this position, um, Black could consider taking. Black should be careful about when E4 happens. So it's possible that E4 could happen, and then this knight gets chased to an uncomfortable square. So rook to here, and then on here he would play back, which is the only square for the knight. I suppose he could go out here because there's no G6, but that looks weird, and I think that white might try to go F3 and then make an attack on the try to make an attack on the F file with the rook coming on F1 and F3. So I think that's why Black has to take care not to go E4 at the wrong moment. Queen E7 is a good move here, trying to complete the development, and he might just take at the proper moment and go Queen F8. That all the rooks get traded, and then maybe Black can later play against the isolated pawn with a pretty decent position. Knight H4 is a kind of a move that happens in this variation. Could get dunk into G6 at the right moment. Could try to go Knight F5, pick up the bishop pair. Giri plays a sensible move. Queen D8, it's a funny move. He really would like to keep his rooks connected, but this would be kind of unfortunate, and I'm sure those guys are well aware of that. So he goes Queen D8 and gets out of the way of both the Knight G6 and Knight F5. Queen B3 forks two pawns, but after the simple Rook F8, I don't think he could take it. Now Knight G6 would have happened. I think he would go B5, and if this bishop gets chased off, then he takes the hanging knight. And in this position, in the middle game, we know that two pieces are better than a rook and a pawn. And in ending, a rook and a pawn can cause a lot of trouble for uncoordinated pieces. But here, I believe in a middle game, the two pieces are better than the rook and the pawn. So Knight G6 doesn't work there. So his queen went back to D1 and B5, hitting the bishop like we spoke about earlier. The bishop went back to A2, staying on that good diagonal, hoping for some action later on. And Giri gets out of the way of the Knight G6 ideas, and it looks like Black is just doing okay here. At some point, Black is threatening to take this pawn. Bishop to C1, defending the pawn. When I saw this game, I thought, all right, how can Black be worse here? Now, Black can play solidly if he wants here, and I'm sure he would be okay. But he went G5, and I think it's actually a pretty good. It's a pretty good move. He gets some things started. He might open up the G file. His king is out of the way here, and there's no pieces near White's king, so White has to be and Aronian has to be a little careful here. So Aronian decides to took with the knight. I think that's the best. And now he plays F4. If knight back, maybe Queen E7, maybe G4. It's possible that something like this could happen here. And on G4, if the queen took, knight takes doesn't look bad. Attacks here, and bishop takes could be considered also. I think in either case, White would really have to cover up the king. With this bishop over here, there could be vulnerable squares on G2 and G3. So Aronian tries for a counter-attacking move. Giri takes. Now, I mean, it's a little weird at this point, but I think Black might actually be a little bit better here. After E4, rook to here, I think that maybe White should just go bishop to F4, and that would pretty much be an equality. Bishop takes F7, almost got Aronian into trouble after rook G7 because his attack on H3 remains. Then he plays bishop F4, so his idea is that on takes, rook takes, he'll go E5 and get the piece back. But he takes and he captures here. Now he's hitting this one and this one. and king h2 is a good move. Um, it, so there's queen trades all over the place here with this knight possibly hanging. So bishop d7 was forced, and Aronian plays a good move. Aronian realizes a danger here and starts just steering the game into a drawish territory with bishop e6. Knight g4 check, rook takes, bishop takes, a lot of stuff gets traded, and rook takes. Black could be a little better here, just a little, but not nowhere near enough to win with players at this level. Rook to d4, he's trying to get his pawns going, but Aronian defends very well here. Rook to f4 was good. He gets out of the way, rook f5. He's trying to go rook c5 to maybe get some action against black's pawns. And rook to c4 stops it, and king to f g3, the king's coming up. It's an ending, of course. All right, now Giri is trying to get at this pawn, and white, of course, has to be careful not to allow two connected pass pawns, which would be a real problem. Giri played b3 so that his rook is free to move without hanging b4. And then Aronian plays knight e3, preventing rook coming from c2, a very safe move. And his knight can also come to f5. Rook to a5, threatening the pawn, and Giri plays just bishop g6, stopping these knight f5 threats. Knight f5, and now the game just turns into a draw. And king back, and here, and this. And now what happens here is that Aronian just went king to g2, avoiding all these tricks that could happen if the king went to f2 or something here. Also, the king can maybe go up to g4 then, but then he'll wait for f6. So king g2 is just making a draw. If he went king g4, it would be something like this and here, and then he would just play rook f1, take the pawn with a simple draw. So we had a round of all draws today, and black played, and I don't think it was for lack of fighting. I think it was just a very solid round. Tomorrow will be round 4, and on Friday is the day off, so we'll see what's going on. So after 3 rounds, we have Nakamura and Kramnik leading with 2 out of 3, and a mob after that with 1.5, and then Anand and Giri with 1 point out of 3 -1. The leaders are +1. It's a tightly packed tournament. Everybody has a chance to win after 3 rounds. So thank you, everybody. Hope you enjoyed today's recap of the Altibox Norway Stavanger tournament. And I hope to see everybody. I'll be doing my Simon in a couple of weeks, heading to Castle Chess Camp in Atlanta on Saturday. And for some of the listeners, I hope to see you there. All right. Thank you, everybody. This is GM John Fedorowicz for ICC's recap of the Altibox Norway tournament. Enjoy the rest of the coverage, everybody. Take care. Bye.